I've watched enough of these videos that I know you don't want to listen to me ramble for too long, so let's jump straight into the really cool B-roll and then dive into the rest of the substance of this video. The shoot was massively inspired by recently seeing Interstellar in full 70mm IMAX. And part of that had to do with my ability to borrow these Mamiya medium format lenses from one of my friends, who also happens to have the speed booster and just a regular straight through adapter. These lenses were incredibly fun to shoot with, and there's a look that I've been chasing for a while that I don't know how to describe other than the frame just feels bigger. It's hard to actually put some really good descriptors on it, because as someone who shoots primarily on full frame cameras and having access to a lot of prime lenses, being able to shoot at 1.8, 1.4, 1.2, it's not necessarily just the depth of field that's the thing. It's the physical size of the frame. And the only way to describe it is the reason most people go for medium format when it comes to film or for photography is just the physical largeness of that frame or negative. And back in the film days, that was the only way you could really increase resolution dramatically, was by actually making the physical negative bigger. Now in the digital world, we have access to high resolution, smaller sensors. But what this is doing is it's creating a lot of detail, but not creating a physical sizeness to the frame. And if you actually dive into crop factors and the way that medium format lenses actually, create the look that they do, it's because you're able to get a similar field of view with a medium format lens at a longer focal length, but the equivalent to a wider One of the interesting things when you look into the reasons why people tend to go to medium format for their photography is because you get a similar field of view to a wider focal length, but with the longer focal length for better compression. Anyways, you all know that medium format look that you're trying to go after. Being able to apply that to video is something that I've been super interested in for a very long time after I bought my first medium format camera at the end of 2020. Moving on to the camera. I shot this whole thing on my FX3, and utilizing the external recording, we shot the whole thing in ProRes RAW. Maxing out at 4K 60 for slow motion, which hindsight 2020, it would have been nice to be able to do a couple of these shots in 120 frames a second, just to get that little bit slower, more detailed motion on some of the shots. But for the most part, I was pretty happy with how it turned out, and the slow motion that I got out of this camera was absolutely phenomenal. The flexibility of shooting on the FX3 meant that I could move very quickly. I have a pretty sweet little rig that I built out using a couple wooden handles, a base plate, 15mm rods, and ergonomically mounting the Atomos Ninja V on camera right at eye level, so I could get pretty accurate focus pulls and also just comfortably hold the camera all day. That's a logistic that I see a lot of people overlooking when it comes to building out camera rigs, is how ergonomically comfortable is this going to be if I have to hold it all day long. Continuing on in that same theme, part of the reason that I wanted to shoot to the external recorder is so that I could load in different LUTs. Now, that's one of my favorite features in Dehancer, is the ability to export LUTs that you can then use in a monitor to preview what your film look is going to be while you're on set. This allows me to make faster decisions when it comes to lighting, creating color contrast, and how different white balances are going to overall affect the final image. Now, I was shooting ProRes RAW, edited the whole thing in DaVinci Resolve. That's another video for another day. I'll have to dive into my ProRes RAW to resolve workflow. I think I might have found the most efficient way to do it that also technically is the cheapest. That's another video for another day. The primary thing being that I get that extra 12-bit video file out of the FX3, which in my opinion gives it the full color flexibility that you would be looking for, especially if you're going for a film emulation look in post. 10-bit files are pretty flexible and you can get a lot out of it, but I think that when you're trying to really push and pull colors and push dynamic range, you need those extra 2 bits, which add on a dramatic amount more information when it comes to trying to recreate that film look with the grain and all of the other things going on. One of the biggest calling cards for the work that I like to produce is the use of natural sound in a lot of my videos. Go for it. This is something that I've been super fascinated by, and going all the way back to early 2020, when I was just kind of figuring out how natural sound really allowed you to cement someone into a scene without the need for additional work through Foley or other use cases. Now, getting into Foley is something that I would love to do on a project. I just personally haven't had anything that has needed to justify it, that I haven't been able to fill that need using natural sound recorded on set. And the tools that I use for this have changed over time dramatically, and it's gotten me to a point where I feel confident going into pretty much any shoot that I'm doing. I'll be able to get all of the natural sounds needed to really tie together a story. Diving into the equipment on that side of things, the reason that this video has that like big movie sound to it is because all of the vocals were primarily recorded on the Sennheiser MKH50, which is arguably one of my favorite microphones of all time, outside of this new Lewitt LCT 440, which I'm absolutely loving, especially for vocal-heavy YouTube videos that I want to have that like professional voiceover sound. And little secret, the Sennheiser MKH50 is also the perfect size to fit in the shotgun holder on the FX3 without the need of additional spacers and all the things. I additionally use a Bumblebee Windjammer sock dead cat thing to make sure that I'm protecting that capsule as best as possible, because this mic is so sensitive that even the smallest amount of wind can cause some irreversible damage to the mic. Recording on camera with a small diaphragm condenser like the MKH50 has really opened my eyes to the subtlety of small detail sounds that mostly get overlooked when it comes to the filmmaking process. And that's why I absolutely love using the MKH50 on camera for getting all of my sounds, but then also secondarily as a vocal mic. There actually was one line in the video that I just used on-camera audio from the MKH50 because it fits so well with like the rest of the narrative. And instead of using that line from the interview, I used it from just talking and going through the rest of the shoot.
Forged a couple blades and then got into like modern knife making.
And I think it kind of works out great being able to utilize those in-between moments of conversation instead of just being locked into whatever you captured in the interview. For the on-talent mic, I use my trusty Sanken Cos 11D lav mic. It's been absolutely one of my favorite mics. Chances are I'm going to be upgrading it to a DPA 4060, as I got to use one at my previous job for the past year, and it's taken the throne as one of my new favorite lav mics just simply for the size and overall quality that it outputs. It's also super small, so in terms of being able to hide it on talent, it just makes that job so much easier. After all this, you have to do a little bit of post-production. And for me, some of the biggest things that I've invested in over the past several years was the audio plugins that I use to polish and put that final spin on all of my videos. Running through them pretty quickly, I don't have time in this video for it. That's going to be Isotope, Waves, their entire plugin suite. I think it's like $200 a year. Can't recommend it enough because the value that you get out of it, just simply with their clarity, noise reduction, de-reverb, vocal rider, and like a few other effects, just make it so versatile. Pairing that, I use FabFilter for their EQ, limiter, noise gate. I used to use their compressor, but I recently switched out. Universal Audio was doing a deal back over the holidays, and they were giving away their CLA2 tube compressor Emulation. And I've been using that on a lot of my videos lately and just really love the like warmth and sound that creates. And especially their male voice preset that they have built in just makes my life easier when it comes to actually like creating a final mix. As someone who's a filmmaker who's grown up in the fix it and post era, and especially as someone who works in DaVinci Resolve primarily as their editing software, I have a lot of tools at my disposal to fix, let's be honest, a lot of really bad, easy lighting mistakes. But one of the things that's come to my attention over the past several years at this point has been the speed and efficiency that you can work with when you build out a really incredible set and give yourself kind of that like playground to shoot within, and also like move quickly, but have great lighting everywhere. You know, some of the best DPs and directors that we all follow, the reason that their work looks so good isn't necessarily because they're shooting on an ARRI Alexa. But don't get me wrong, I wouldn't turn down the opportunity if it presented itself to me. The reason that everything looks so good and the reason films look the way they do is because of the tremendous amount of detail that goes into setting up a set, lighting it, creating a look. Anywhere you point any camera on that set, it's going to look incredible. Taking that approach into this project, I brought on my friend Connor to help out and do all the lighting for this shoot. He's a professional grip, and let me tell you, I'm seeing the value of having someone who's just dedicated to making pretty light anywhere you go, because this was arguably one of the easiest shoots I've ever done because I was able to communicate the vision for it. This is what we're doing. This is what we're creating the look-wise. Walked into the space, turned off all the lights, set up our additional tube and accent lights to kind of help add on to the window light that was coming into the workshop. And then he basically just followed around everywhere we were going with an additional tube light that we were constantly changing color, temperature, intensity, and all that to just add that like nice little bit of an accent to everything that we were doing. And I think it's one of the most naturalistic looking videos I've ever been able to shoot. And like you almost wouldn't, outside of like the interview, you wouldn't really say, oh, this was very well lit. Yeah. No, it just looks like we're shooting in a really cool shop. And the reason for that is because we took a lot of intentional care to make sure that everything we were doing lighting-wise wasn't fighting against what we were working with, and it was working with it to be able to create that very natural, true-to-life feeling. Or the terminology that I discovered a number of years ago, which I hope to use to describe my work, is cinema verite, or, pursuit of the truth. And that for me, as a filmmaker, someone who wants to tell stories and have that like really natural, true to life reaction from people, that's what I'm going to go for in pretty much everything. So yeah, you'll occasionally get some really dramatic lighting when it comes to an interview. But my goal is when we're shooting for the person, yes, make it look pretty, but I also want it to feel like you're there with the person, because that's the only way you're really going to get to like truly hear their story and like feel it emotionally. Okay, so now to dive into the part that I know you've pretty much all been tuning in for, That's what are my thoughts on Dehancer. And I didn't want to make this part of the video until I had a chance to actually put it through its paces in being a part of a project from start to finish, shooting on vintage film lenses, going for that medium format look, incorporating the film look to the entire ethos and approach to the project. And I'm coming out of it after this very, very impressed. And I think film emulation, while it's not going to be for every single project, because depending on the actual client that you're going for, most of the time they're not necessarily going to want that like super grungy, compressed color look that film tends to offer. But when you find the right client that fits that vibe, it's going to be the perfect thing. And while film is still like pretty cost prohibitive to shoot for actual like commercial cinematography, the next closest thing you can get is being able to utilize the infinite compatibility with vintage lenses and something like Dehancer for film emulation to get the like complete overall cohesive look for film in a like commercial pipeline, and with the flexibility of shooting everything digitally, which recommending the FX3 in this case, I can't recommend it enough. It just is so crazy flexible for what you can get. But if I had to hit on the few biggest points that I really liked about this, it would have to come down to probably the top 2 or 3. First being the grain. Now, film grain is one of those things that it's like, you know, a little, just like super glue, a little dab, perfect, holds everything together. But if you overdo it, you just end up in this like sticky mess of like your fingers are all glued together and you're just sitting there like trying to figure out what's going on. And same thing with film grain. If you go a little bit too heavy-handed with it, it just completely falls apart and it's like, okay, what are we even doing here? Like, yes, sometimes it is nice to have like a really heavy-handed film look, but for the most time, subtlety is key. And having all of the fine-tunable controls in Dehancer to be able to make that a reality is what makes this tool so powerful. The second thing that I love about Dehancer as a program is honestly the speed that you can use it if you're not a professional colorist. Now, for my entire short film, I used a very specific node tree pipeline and then output that to Rec 709 and then added the film look on top because I wanted to have more flexibility and control over my image before it went through film emulation. And that allowed me to create the custom final look for this film rather than being stuck with whatever controls you have within Dehancer. But on the flip side, if you're a new colorist, one of the great things about it is the ability that, you know, if they have your camera profile, which at the time of recording this, there were quite a few missing. If they have their profile for your camera, you can actually get really, really great results. Just drop in the log image, throw Dehancer on it. If they have your camera and profile, it converts super accurately, which I absolutely love, especially being able to suggest this to people just getting into the video world who want to get better, more filmic looking colors out of their video. The third and final piece to Dehancer that I really like and have mostly been utilizing is their attention to detail when it comes to the different aspects of film emulation. And what I mean by this is like, you know, we all are very familiar with different film stocks, and there's obviously the different film stocks you have options for in Dehancer, but they also give you different print outputs because, and while I'm not speaking from true experience on this, what I do understand about the film process is the paper that you actually print on has a direct output to the final overall color and output and contrast and all the things in your actual image. And so in Dehancer, you have the ability to change your print output. You have the ability to change your gamma compression. You have the ability to change all of these different settings that really allow you to fine tune the final image to be as close to that true filmic look. And I didn't even get a chance to dive into halation, overscan, and like some of the other really cool tools that Dehancer really allows for you, to dive into that full nostalgia vibe. Maybe I'll make a Super 8 inspired film someday, but as for today, I'm primarily going after the like color, grain, and like overall density that you get from shooting film. And, for me, applying some additional color tools before that transformation so that I actually get the really nice, pleasant highlight roll-off that you get with that film look. Okay, so to wrap it up and put a nice little bow on it, I am really thankful for everyone that made this project come to life. Shout out to Dehancer for sending over that plugin initially for me to do some reviews and just really play around with it and have fun. Check the description down below, get 10% off, coupon code Brandon Goodyear. Goes without saying. Thank you so much for watching, and I am really excited to get back into creating this year. And until then, I will see you guys in the next video.